Welcome to the Clock Tower. I'm Brandon here with Colton, and today we're doing the gameplay for the Overlord 8 standby build that was previewed earlier this week. Colton, what are you playing today?
I've got 8 Bar Dragon Maid. This is the list that I took forth with in the North American online regional. And it's a pretty good litmus test just to kind of see like what a deck does, just because it's very straightforward in its game plan but also has responses. So it's a good way to test and see like what the strengths and weaknesses of another deck are.
No, absolutely. So, with this build, if you didn't see the video earlier this week, um, two main combos that really make up the deck. We have the level 1 combo with the 1/1 Eins. He's trying to get reverses to get characters into hand. He is a 7/5 basic kind of your basic standby target at 0, trying to get that on field, get that big body. So when you hit level 1, you have the 7/5 body, and then you're standbying in your support piece. The support piece being the 2/2 that can change into the 3/2 at level 2. When it does that, three things happen. The change happens, so you heal. You also are able to get the 2/2 event into hand, which is your Neg Soul event. And then the third thing is that you also, with that combo, get the standby in as well. So you have like three things going on all at once at that one combo.
Yeah, I almost really like this 8 standby list. Ultimately, like its biggest issue is that it just doesn't have a way to close. Like it's literally Trouble Girl, right? It's Trouble Girl with a Neg Soul event, and that's fine. But like you're paying 3 for the Neg Soul event at 3, you're paying 2 for it at 2. So that's a lot of stock to commit. So you have to hit your standby triggers. You have to win board, and that's a lot to ask, I think, in the current meta, because we've got a lot of stuff that can just remove things from the board really easily. But like generically, I like the idea. I like the idea of being able to start, doing the Neg Soul, the anti-auto at 2. It forces your opponent to play around it. I think the bomb package is really interesting. The bombs at 0 that then, you can send into clock off of the level 1 Shaltir.
Yeah, that's the other that's the other half of this build, is really kind of relying on that package to really set up everything else, right? It's between the brainstorm that's in the back row already and that package, really trying to just bring the resource count up for hand, and also potential just to draw into climax, because the climax combo is very essential in this deck, in this game plan.
Right, so you have better access to CX, better access to pieces, but also, not only is it just a generic plussing engine, it also, you already have room to work with in your damage because you're in theory not taking as much because you have the Neg Soul event, because you have the anti-auto.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to be taking less damage over the course of the mid to late game. So in theory, clocking yourself once or twice to draw into a card, it's not going to be a problem. Like that is a cost you're willing to pay to make sure you have cards in hand.
Yeah, and especially also having that ability to kind of try to force yourself to 2 first as well. Like being able to not necessarily be level locked with those cards in play. So you can also,
Sure.
because realistically, everything changes when you hit level 2. You want to hit 2 and then stay at 2 as long as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So, especially if you know you have heals coming at 2, you can also kind of get extra cards in as well in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But
And
the
you can also start winning board pretty much right away at 1 here, because now you've got a pair of 9s
mhm,
in your front row.
yeah,
And those are hard to get over with pretty much any normal level 1 game.
yeah, and realistically, Alice has kind of proved that, right? I have the backup in hand. I actually have two backups in hand, which is really fun. to be able to back both of those up to 11, which is our Alice numbers, right? Those are the numbers that
Mm-hmm.
Alice sits at when Alice comes down about the same time frame.
Mm-hmm.
So we already know that that threshold is pretty difficult to deal with. Most people that have answers for Alice are all like level 2 answers
Mm-hmm.
or deals with level 2 specifically. So having that kind of threshold with level 1s can make it difficult to deal with, as well as like trying to figure out how to play into it.
Yeah, there aren't a whole lot of 11K level ones that are just going to be sitting on the board cross turn.
Yeah. So many may try to side into it to allow it to still get soul damage against me, but try to keep board cross turn,
Mm-hmm.
which only then benefits Eins getting the reverses. So it's like you either need to crash out board or
Mm-hmm.
commit too many resources to try to step over.
This is where it's a standby deck,
Mm-hmm.
right? And standby decks don't push damage like generically unless they have other things that pump soul or other ways to ping for damage in the mid game.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest weakness of the 8 standby list is that it just generically as an archetype is that it cannot take advantage of a bad deck state unless it's already got its 2/2 targets out. So like the first 3 turns of the game, it can't push damage. So conceding that open lane feels really bad. Conceding the reverse feels really bad. You're giving the standby list an advantage that it normally wouldn't have, which is either an on reverse plussing combo or more damage into an open lane. And you don't want to give them either of those things. So trying to find a way to get over is still useful. I'm able to clear 1 because Dragon Maid has a lot of power. So I'm able to actually power tie this here. And I'm like, all right, if I force out the counter, I force out the counter. That's 1 less card that you have. So now, like, you don't get the reverse target, and you lose the card, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm making you make a choice there.
For me, I elect to not do the counter here because I knew that I was kind of clean here at the end of my deck. So I knew I was going into level 2. So I would rather have the cards in hand to change my change targets in my back row.
Yep. And for me, I'm comfortable siding here because I know you're at level 2, right? So I know you want to use your level 2 combo. I'm not worried about conceding the reverse at this point. And I could side for 1 there, put you into 2. That's fine with me. I'm okay with that. My compression here is pretty decent. I think I'm 4 out of 17 here.
One of the big things I actually really appreciate about this standby deck is that it doesn't need a full board for its effects to happen.
Yeah, especially in a deck like this one that doesn't play with a big hand, because you just don't have a ton of great hand plussing aside from like the clock self engine, which you don't have on the board right now. Like, it's very important that you're able to win and keep board with 3 characters on the board.
Yeah.
Because that's a card or 2 that you just get to keep in your hand. Especially now you get to hold up the events too, because the events, they just burn a hole in your hand, right? They're not playables. You can't do anything with them except their specific function, and you want them in hand. So you need to keep your hand as big as you can so that those aren't just dead cards.
Mm-hmm. I also find it's really interesting that that event specifically is better at level 2 than level 3 because the cost is more cost effective.
Yeah, like, I get it. I get why it is the way that it is. Like, at level 2, it's actually extremely powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's functionally a 2-cost counter with power.
Yep.
Which is that's really good. That's a really good card. But then when it gets into level 3, it just becomes a Night Soul counter.
Yep.
I think that's a way to like kind of compensate for the fact that the top end doesn't do damage. Like, it's a way to try to really, like, you're really trying to keep this going,
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to keep this on the board several turns in a row and all this. But yeah, it's it's a lot, and you also have to keep committing that, right? Like, it's still 2 stock every time you play it.
Yep.
And the deck wants you to play it multiple times. Because Elma is a ridiculous profile, I'm able to get Elma up to, like, I think it's 13-5 here. I haven't seen a 2-1 counter. I don't think you have one. So I'm 2 over with the Ilalu 1/1, and I'm like, I think 2-5 over with the Elma.
Yeah.
So I know I'm going to win both these lanes. I assume that you probably have the Negsoul counter up, but like I'm totally content to play into it.
Yeah, well,
just because like I know I'm removing it.
Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna try to like play around it or get cute. I also know that you're out 6 climaxes and you still cancel 2 out of 17. So like at this point I'm a little salty because it's like, okay, you were way out of climaxes. I should have stuck some damage there and I didn't.
Yeah, but that's also the benefit of the Nexel counter, right? Is to be able to try to
You can mitigate some of the swings, right?
Yeah.
Like even if you're in a bad deck state, Nexel counter means the maximum amount of damage your opponent can push is minimized. And when you do get those lucky cancels, because you will, because it's Weiss, the value of those cancels goes up.
Mm-hmm. This is where it becomes really difficult because I want to get the climax swap so I can actually like get the CX that I want. However, my CX swaps are both in waiting room right now, and the only tool that I have in my hand is a drop search. So I need to refresh my deck to be able to get access to them, but I don't have it on this turn, so I have to kind of play that off climax here.
Yeah.
Like being able to combo here again would have been so nice.
Right, because then you get the Nexel counter back.
Yep. I get another Nexel counter. I would have 2 of them on board. I would also heal 1, so I'd be back down to 2-1.
Mm-hmm. And then I think I just ate 6 off the top. So like, and again, like, you know, that just happens. So I'm at 3-3. I need to stick 11 here with the refresh point. And your refresh is about to be pretty solid, but I know these 2 are clean. I also, one of the reasons that I wanted to go out the 2-2 counter specifically was also because I want to make sure you don't have enough stock for tap counter. Because Overlord has tap counter. And that's something that I think people might forget. I know I have forgotten it in testing at times. But no matter which Overlord deck you're playing into, be aware they can have tap counter. They may not all run it, even, but they may have access to it. Look for it when Overlord refreshes. Every single time, look for that tap counter. They're probably not going to clutch it from the opening hand. So it's probably going to be in waiting room, or they're going to trigger it or something. Be on the lookout for it. I know you can't do it because it requires 5 stock, so I can safely play the Ilalu into the middle. I assume that you probably have the 2-2 because I've only seen 3. So I assume that you have one in hand. You could have one still in the deck. But I also know that like I need to reach. The game was just one turn too fast for me because again, like I didn't push you, or I didn't stick the damage on you, and I just turned around and ate 2 big swings on the backswing. So like I was hoping to be at like 2-5, 2-6 here and that's a place where I can survive. Because again, you only have burn ones. So like I don't mind. Even if I'm at 3-0 here, I don't mind. But being at 3-3, it's annoying. So I need to throw the Ilalu on the board now. So, and at this point, I think that's your 4th 2-2. I think that I just saw the 4th 2-2 event leave your deck. I don't think you have it at this point. So it's like, okay, I'm just going to go, right? So I got my 2 free damage with the 2 soul swing. So I'm just like, all right, I'm just going to swing with the Ilalu and see what I've got. The 1 sticks, and then out comes the 2-2. I am sad. And then you double cancel it anyway.
Yeah.
So it didn't actually matter. But that was really my path, was like I needed the Ilalu to stick 5, which is also why I threw the drop searcher down. I didn't use it. I just threw it down for the extra soul pump because I knew I would need the reach.
I also
swing here for 2.
I also knew there was a pretty good chance that I would double cancel it just because it was a swing for 5.
The odds are decent. I mean, you refreshed 8 out of 29, 8 out of 28 with the refresh point. So like your odds of double canceling there are decent.
But at the same
like,
time, I couldn't risk eating 5.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's always the chance that it could work, right? Because if it does work, that's just lethal.
Yeah. In
a lot of games, that's just lethal. In this game, it wouldn't have been. But in a lot of games, like if you eat a 5, like that's just death. So.
And now this time I could drop search for the swapper, but I don't have the stock for the swapper,
Mm-hmm.
nor do I have the stock for the changes. So it's like that's
Mm-hmm.
also a big thing too. Is like if I not played the neg soul counter there, I could have gotten 2 heals off,
Yep.
which would have been effectively about the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, and that's one of those things with this, right? Like
yeah,
this deck is very stock intensive, and it requires you to make a decision about what you're going to prioritize.
yep.
Generically, I like it.
Oh yeah,
Like I do like this deck just kind of in a generic sense. But I I do have concerns that it's a little too stock intensive and that the burn one top end just isn't enough. And like I don't have enough to do anything here. I'm at 3-6. I have 4 cards in my deck. Like
yeah.
I don't have the resources to push enough damage at all. So I just died a refresh here. And of course there's the cancel on the bottom because it's always on the bottom.
Yeah, having three climaxes in the bottom 4 cards. Yeah. Nope. Understandable.
So yeah, didn't get my cancels, but it is what it is. In any case, yeah, I think the 8 standby list is solid. I mean, it's not the Eins. The Eins is
No.
better. Like there's no question about that. But I do think this list is decent. I also think that um there aren't as many people playing the stuff that negates it. You're not going to see as much blink. You're not going to see
Well,
as much just like raw
Blink
board removal on a stick the way that we have in previous metas.
Blink doesn't do anything against this one. That's one of the big things about this deck is that Blink doesn't do anything because it's off of the counter. It's not off of the character itself.
Well, the anti-auto.
Yeah, that's fair. The anti-auto, the anti-burn.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The anti-auto is like so you're forced to play around it in the same way that you play around the Kasumi,
Yep.
right? So like in order to deal with this entirely, you need to have both of the pieces that allow you to either side for free or blink it or both in order to get around either the Nexal counter or the anti-auto.
Yep.
So like it requires you to have a lot of things, and most people are sleeving up maybe one of those 2 pieces,
Mm-hmm.
not both. Or like maybe there's like some kind of like straight up hard removal. Like this thing dies super hard to Eins for so many reasons.
It does.
Because it doesn't shut off the Eins burns. The Eins just blows it up off the board completely. So like it's funny that this deck is just so particularly useless against Eins.
Mm-hmm.
And that alone really is, I think, what keeps it out of any consideration for even being like a fun rogue deck.
Yeah.
Because like it just immediately folds
It
to Eins.
It immediately folds to Eins. Realistically, it is really bad against IMA. IMA has the power to just straight up remove it from board, the 2 pieces it needs. Even if you encore it back to stage, it would remove the anti-burn. If
Yeah.
you don't bring it back to stage, you can't do the Nexal because you have to have that character on stage for the Nexal.
Right, which is why that Neg Soul is an overspec profile.
Yeah.
Right, which is why you're allowed to get Neg 3 Soul for 2 cost at level 2, is because it only works when you have that one character on the board.
And so if you spend the stock to encore the character back to field, you don't have the stock for the Nexal. So it's like...
Exactly.
So it's essentially a kind of lose-lose situation there.
Yeah.
So at that point, you're basically playing vanilla 8 standby with tap counter versus Hololive. That's like 2 of the major decks that are going to be at representation at regionals.
Yeah.
That, yeah, that just it auto dies to. So it's like, no, this is even for a rogue deck at a regional event currently, this isn't it. With that in mind, thanks so much for watching.
Yeah, we will be back on Tuesday with Clock Talk because we're going to Chicago this weekend. We'll talk about that on Tuesday. We'll 5 cards 5 minutes on Thursday for, I don't know, is it the new review Starlight?
It is.
Okay, sweet. I'm looking forward to that. That set is not very good, but it's going to be very fun. And then the following week, I have a review Starlight deck. I think that's my review Starlight deck. The following Tuesday, we'll have gameplay for that in 2 weeks. Until next time, thank you so much for joining us. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and have a good one.
We'll see you then.